getting into product management in general, the key in my mind is really being able to look at a problem from both the technological perspective as well as the end user perspective.
Kevin, can you please tell me about yourself?
Sure. So I am always been a technology enthusiast ever since I was kind of a kid. I was taking things apart, trying to figure out how they worked. So kind of throughout my life, I've had an interest in technology, electronics, and stuff like that. So did my undergrad in electrical engineering and parlayed that into an internship during my undergrad that turned into a full-time job working for a small company. I was doing circuit board design and eventually got kind of into more of the product management space within that company. Realized that I really had an interest and passion for that as opposed to kind of sitting there doing circuit board designs all day. Went back, got my MBA. Continued kind of in that focus of the product management, offering management type of space, and ended up with a full-time job at IBM after my MBA, and I've been working there for about the last year or so now. I'm in their public cloud group, working on an internal-facing team that works on the infrastructure, back-end infrastructure that supports the rest of the cloud offering.
Gotcha. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of getting into IBM? I don't think I've heard the interview process or, the whole application process there.
Yeah, so it's actually changed a little bit. So I'll tell you what I did and do a little bit of update on what's happening now.
Yeah.
So when I went through it, I actually ended up getting an internal referral link. I did some networking with some of the alumni from UNC that worked at IBM. But after I did that, there was actually an assessment that I had to do that was just a test. I guess it was, I don't know, kind of like a logic test. It was kind of interesting. Kind of reminded me like of an ACT, PSAT, whatever type of experience with some weird logic, math type of questions. And then after that, I guess I did well enough to pass. They moved me on to the next round, which was a video assessment. So there were recorded questions that I had to answer on video. And my understanding is that those get analyzed, I think, both through some sort of machine learning and also human evaluations. And I passed that. And then I went on to a live video interview with a current offering manager at IBM. I think it was only a 30-minute interview. It was pretty quick. And I guess I did well enough in that they decided to extend me an offer to come in for a final round interview. And so for the onboarding final round interview, it's actually a large event. They invite candidates from, across the country really, and they will bring you all into one place. I went up to Boston, but they also have events I know in Austin and I think other places. But there's probably 150 candidates there that were all in this final round interview, and they basically set it into groups. And there were two in my group, and I think in all the groups, pretty much, there was one person interviewing for an offering manager role. There were two people interviewing for designer roles, and then there were two people interviewing for developer roles. And they basically gave us a case question. It was relatively open-ended. It was something to do with how to use Watson to improve some process. I don't remember exactly what it was anymore. But then we had essentially 24 hours to design, do rough prototyping, and come up with I think it was a 15-minute presentation that we pitched out to the current IBMers that were there. And they did evaluations. While we were there, there was also a period where they pulled you out and you did another face-to-face interview with one of the IBM evaluators. Wow. And so it was a pretty intense weekend event. I honestly didn't leave the hotel the whole time. I took an Uber from the airport, was at the hotel. They fed us all our meals and we stayed there and we're in the conference rooms for all of the work. And then they bused us back to the airport at the end. So it was a very interesting weekend, but I actually thought it was really cool. They also did a lot of things to tell you about IBM as a company, kind of sell you on the company while you were still in that interview process, so you can understand what you're getting into and kind of give you the feedback so you can make an informed decision as well.
Interesting.
And then I promised you I'd give you a slight update on what's happening now. I don't think they do the assessment like I did, the math logic thing. But I think the rest of it's relatively similar. They're using a video platform where you go in and get pre-recorded questions and you have to answer them. And then I'm actually acting as an evaluator this year on that. So I get to see the candidates' videos and watch them and provide feedback that gets piped into the system as part of that process. And then I think from there, the rest of the process is relatively similar. I'm not sure how the whole COVID situation is going to affect any of the in-person stuff, but I think the intention is that, going forward, the process will be essentially what it was for me after that kind of first step.
Interesting. You work as an offering manager at IBM, which is essentially a product manager for other companies. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, offering manager is essentially equal to product manager. I think it's just IBM has a lot of non-physical products that they deliver to customers. So they felt that offering was a better term than product to describe what they're delivering to their customers. There's a lot of services that IBM provides. But in all intents and purposes, it's the same thing functionally. I'll tell you what I do, and I'll also break out a little bit more on the general offering management role at IBM. So specifically, I am an offering manager in the public cloud group, as I said, and the team I work on is in the infrastructure as a service. So what I do on a day-to-day basis, I'm actually working on a net new offering, kind of looking towards the future right now, which is pretty exciting. So we're looking at, what is the future and how do we deliver that? So on a daily basis, I will work with the other teams within IBM Cloud. So the compute teams, the storage teams, the network teams to figure out, what their requirements are for our offering, since we're really largely catering to them. I also work with stakeholders in our actual data centers. And then I'm also working with our developers that are, coding out what these interfaces are going to look like, how the things are going to interact, as well as our operations teams that are defining, how the different systems communicate with each other, ensuring that, there's a lot of security and all that stuff. That's kind of the day-to-day from the cool offering management thing. And then you also have, all of the tasks like updating schedules and statuses and all of that stuff that you just kind of have to do as part of an offering manager to make sure all the people are on the same page, because that's a big part of the role, is just ensuring that all the different parties and groups are aligned and marching in the same direction.
Gotcha.
So that's really what I'm doing. From a broader IBM perspective, there is a lot of different things that offering managers do. It's something about IBM that you really have to realize is that it's absolutely giant. I mean, there's 350,000+ employees around the world. There's so many different groups, organizations, efforts, initiatives going on that it's almost like we're all different companies in a lot of ways. The offering management roles that you end up doing is going to be very dependent on which group you fall into. If you fall into, a group that might be more on a more well-established products, something like maybe our Z mainframes or something that have been a staple in the industry for decades. Your role is going to be slightly different than if you're an offering manager on our blockchain team or our quantum team, right? So we have a lot of different types of responsibilities, and some of those are going to be more focused on, what is the market, what is the competition, how do we deliver, how do we beat that, because the customer needs are pretty well established. Other ones where it's really an emerging market, something like a blockchain, where you're really still defining out what customers going to use it for, how it can be leveraged, what are applications. It's going to be a very different type of role.
Did you have prior product management experience? And if, well, yes or no, did you have a learning curve coming in as an offering manager in IBM?
Yeah, so at my role before the MBA, I did, like I said, just kind of start to touch on the product management role. It was a very small company, though. We're talking like 15 people size company. So it was a very different type of responsibility set than what I'm seeing now, as well as what I'm sure you'd see at most larger corporations. So I would say I did have some experience, but it was at a very high level because I was responsible for really, everything from designing the
Yeah.
circuit board up through the documentation, through, what's the customer experience, what's the website look like. So it was a very broad but shallow type of product management. Whereas what I'm doing now is a lot deeper into a specific technology space. So I would say there's a lot of learning curve coming in just to get up to speed on the technology space that I'm operating in, and have really any deep background into how the cloud operates or infrastructure as a service or any of that stuff. So there's a huge learning curve just in terms of information there. And a year in, I'm still learning things all the time. In terms of product management, IBM actually does something pretty cool. And I didn't talk about this on how I got my job, but it probably could have fit in there. Once you do get hired, you get hired as an associate offering manager into IBM, and they onboard you through it was a 6-week program when I went through it. I'm not sure if that's going to change or not, but I think that's still what it is. And they spend those 6 weeks, you do, kind of a mock project. Ours was with some of the designers, and we got to work with actual IBM teams on a problem they were facing and try to come up with a solution, talking to different stakeholders within the company. So it was kind of like a super accelerated internship type of project. But while you're doing that, that's maybe half your time. The other half your time is they're bringing in different individuals from across the offering management and just general IBM space to give you a lot of training on different tools and processes that are available within IBM. Because again, IBM is just so big. There's so many resources that you need basically to be educated on the resources that are available, so you know what to pick and pull at when you do hit a problem. So yeah, it was a lot of learning curve. I got a good foundation from that 6 weeks of training. And then, it's just kind of a matter of getting into my team, seeing where there were gaps that I could start to fill and working on them. So I continue to pick up, offering management skills all the time as I continue to develop. So I'd say it's a continual learning process, but I wouldn't say a lot of the information I had before my MBA or even things I learned during my MBA were directly applicable. It's been a lot of just kind of learn as you go and ask for help as you need it.
That's awesome. It's that's really good that they actually provide you some sort of established program / training before you actually jump into the role. I don't think a lot of companies actually offer that. What surprised you most about IBM after you joined?
So many things. I mean, coming from a very small company into a absolutely massive company, there's just a lot of the traditional things you'd think of in a big company. Slower moving processes, a lot of politics, and it's interesting looking at my boss and her boss and seeing how they handle different situations, because they understand some of the complexities that actually exist there. So I would say that was kind of something that surprised me. I did my internship between my 2 years at MBA at Dell. So that was a big company, but I wasn't really ingrained enough into any of the teams to get that sense. So to me, that surprised me. Someone coming from a bigger company might not see that as quite as stark a difference with IBM versus another company. But other than that, I mean, I think the things that surprised me the most were just kind of how fast-paced IBM really could be. I think and a lot of people think about IBM, they still think of, Big Blue, everybody's wearing suits. It's very formalized. There's a lot of structure and process. And I'm sure that exists and doesn't exist in different organizations within IBM at different levels. But where I ended up, it's amazingly fast-paced. There's a lot of room for you to define yourself, to change how processes are working and continue to evolve the sphere. So I think perceptually, IBM can sometimes be viewed as not one of the cool tech companies like a Facebook or a Google or an Amazon or something like that. But they're actually doing a lot of very unique and forward-thinking operations across the org. And yes, they still have things like their Z servers that have been around for decades, and they do a lot of consulting services, and that's very different than some of the other companies. But I think it provides a lot of value in the end-to-end offering of what IBM can do. So I think just there's that balance, and it's amazing the number of resources that are available within the company, both people and technology and documents and all that stuff.
Sure. What do you like most and what do you like least about your job?
I really like I really enjoy working on this net new offering. It's exciting because I know that assuming everything works out, this should be the future of the IBM public cloud for years to come, and to know that I had a hand in delivering some of the functionality for that's pretty cool. It's really interesting to see how immensely complicated it is to pull off some of these different offerings. How many teams have to come together and coordinate, and how many small things could break you. You've got to keep your eyes open. So it's a really challenging, highly dynamic work culture that I'm in right now. And I really enjoy the stimulation that provides me, gives me the ability to think outside the box, continue to push the boundaries of what can't be done. So I'd say that's probably what I enjoy the most. And then what I enjoy the least is it's really just some of the things that you always have to do and you run into. Like I said, if I need to get an order for a software that we need to use as part of our offering, I have to go through so many different levels of approvals and checks, and I get the need for all of that, but it's just a pain in the butt to when it takes 2, 3, 4 weeks to say, hey, I really need this, and for it to ever actually get approved and have the money sent so that we can get it. So I'm just dealing with some of the necessary evils, I think, are what frustrate me the most. How to appease your third line manager with a concise report that gives information in a very pointed way, and answers the questions that they want and stuff like that. But I mean, overall, I think I do truly enjoy the work I'm doing right now.
Yeah. My last question is advice for those who want to join IBM or become an offering manager / product manager.
So for IBM specifically, I think I'd come back to some of the points I put out there before. Is there's a lot of differences in what your role is going to look like depending on where you end up. It's a big organization, and that's just kind of the nature of it. So I think just being flexible and willing to kind of buckle down and, embrace whatever area you end up in is important, because unless they change something, the way they hire right now is you get hired as a associate offering manager, and you kind of do a ranking on your preferences in terms of job location or job group. Like if you want to be in servers or cloud or blockchain or whatever, and then they just kind of aggregate all that based on the positions they have available, and you're going to get doled out. So I was very adamant that I needed to be in a specific geographic location, so that essentially defined the group I was going to end up in, and have much say after that point. If I needed box A checked, box B was defined. So that's definitely one thing to know when you're getting into it. Other than that, I mean, I think it's a really good organization to get into. There's a lot of ability to learn, develop, and grow within IBM. I'd say for getting into product management in general, the key in my mind is really being able to look at a problem from the two perspectives. Both the technological perspective as well as the end user perspective. A lot of people will say, it's empathy, and I think that's right. But it's not only be able to empathize with the user and understand their experience and how they actually will utilize your product, it's being able to translate that between the different groups. So if you can take a complicated technical concept and explain it to someone with no background in it, then you're going to have a huge advantage as an offering manager. I find that, sitting down with an architect and listening to what they're saying on how something's going to work, and for me to be able to go and break that out into maybe a couple blocks in a block diagram, or a few pictures or something like that, and then be able to either play that back to the architect, say, hey, is this roughly what you're saying at a high level, and then share that out with the user and say, okay, here's what we're talking about. Being able to use visuals to make that translation, I think, in my experience, has been key. So that's a good skill to work on, is taking technical, complicated concepts and translating them into stupid pictures and diagrams, and not worry if it looks dumb, because really the point is to convey your the meaning, not if your picture looks pretty. I would say one other thing, this kind of goes back more to the IBM thing, is design thinking, and ties in with that empathy thing, is something that IBM really pushes. We spent a good chunk of that training talking about the design thinking process and really getting into your user's head and understanding, figuring out what their pain points are, what works for them, what their current as-is situation is, what you want it to be, how do you deliver that MVP offering that will get them to work, and then continue to iterate on that, very agile. So that's another thing, is start to learn about design thinking and agile, because those are key methods that are being used not just at IBM but across industries.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that was all for today. Again, thank you so much, Kevin, for joining and providing valuable information for everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Young. Thanks for providing this for everyone, so I don't have to answer it one-off all the time. Just for my people.